Hi there. It's nice to meet you.
You too. Is that how you say your name, or do you go by Matt?
Yep, Matthias. That sounds good.
Matthias.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for meeting with me today. I know you're extremely busy.
I'm happy we get to talk. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was waiting for you for a few months. I remember I like hit you up many months ago,
Yeah.
and you said, let's do in summer. And like I think it
Mhm.
was like June 23rd. I looked up, I like Googled when does summer exactly start? And I think it said like June 20th. So I like started, I like messaged you right away, like literally as
Yeah.
soon as summer started.
Well, I admire the persistence. I thought that's what won me over. I was like, oh, yep, she's serious. She wants to be on the podcast. All right, I'll do it.
Yeah, I really did.
Mhm.
I admire your content a lot. And I looked into your history, and
Mhm.
it's very interesting to me. So first of all, a little bit of introduction about you. You work with people and you help them move towards what's meaningful. Um,
Mhm.
and you especially work with people who have gone through lots of hardships like sexual abuse and trauma and
Mhm.
anxiety, depression, all
Yeah.
sorts of hard things like that. And so
Mhm.
I wanted to know, like, how do you go about doing what you do, and what are some of your strategies?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I went to school to be a therapist, and then I got an internship in school where I worked with kids who had been through sexual abuse. And so that was kind of my introductory into the field of psychology, and being a psychotherapist was all about working with kids, which is an interesting place to start because I don't know if you've ever worked with kids. There's a quote by a guy named C.S. Lewis that says, you don't really understand something unless you know how to explain it to a kid."
Right.
And and so it was hard because I got out of this master's program and I had all these big lofty concepts and all these ideas, and I'm trying to kind of learn how to communicate all these philosophical and psychological truths to, I don't know, like a 4-year-old who went through
Yeah.
something just awful. And
Oh,
it really tested me. It really like pushed me, and I had
right.
some really great mentors that were like, okay, cool, like you read a bunch of stuff in textbooks. Do you know how to actually put that into practice in the real world? Like, do you know
Hmm.
how to, if someone came to you asking for help, would you know what to do? Would you know what to say? And at the beginning of that internship, the answer was no. I had no idea what to do. and I learned, I think, I learned both from mentors and watching really skilled clinicians like be able to um, offer treatment for kids who have been through such terrible
Right.
things, and then practicing myself. And what's great about kids is that they don't they're not polite and conscientious of your feelings. If you're being boring, they'll tell you. Like if something doesn't make sense, they're not just gonna nod and smile. They'll be like, what are you
Right.
talking
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Wow, that's a really
about?
good practice then, to like
Yeah.
really be able to like put it into the right words and like simplify your, what you've been taught at school. I love that.
Mhm.
So that was
Yeah.
the
So
beginning of your career.
totally. Yeah. And it was so helpful. I think in a lot of ways, those kids taught me like how to, you know, I think just what happens is you have kind of a big idea and then you have to learn how to boil it down to the essence of maybe the truth underneath it, the thing that's actually helpful, the thing that's actually transformative for people. And that's not just an easy, simple mental exercise. That's actually something that you discover with other people. And
Right.
so when I'm I don't know, making TikTok videos or Instagram videos and talking about trauma or talking about I don't know, just maybe having meaningful relationships with people, it's those are all ideas. Those are all maybe not just my own pontifications that I just come up with out of my own brain. It's like I discovered that with people. Each of those lessons learned has a story that's attached to someone I really care about, to a client that was brave enough to let me into the hardest thing that they had in their whole life. And through sometimes months, sometimes years, we uncovered something extraordinarily meaningful. And then I have the gift and the pleasure of getting to boil that down and try to bring that to other people on the internet through TikTok or YouTube or through a lecture or whatever, and trying to bring those insights so that, I don't
Right.
know, we can all get a little bit closer to what's meaningful. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's essentially my process is a lot of learning, a lot of listening, and then trying to summarize and bring those things to people broadly.
Yeah. And like looking into your practice and like your strategies and your methods, it really reminds me of I don't know if you've ever heard of Viktor Frankl.
Yes.
Right. So he
Yep.
talks a lot about that in his book, where he says like everything really boils down to like what is meaningful to you. Right? Like
Mhm.
all these things where we like think, how can I be happy? Like where can I find happiness? he kind of like just really shreds all of that down to like just figure out what's meaningful to you. And I see that that's kind of like the center of your practice as well, where you
Yeah.
just like help people figure out what's meaningful and move towards that. And so I thought that's really cool, because I've never really seen anybody focus so much on what Viktor Frankl did.
Yeah, that is great catch. I'm hugely inspired by Viktor Frankl. Like,
Yeah.
his book was it was so incredibly helpful because, like I said, I was working with kids who've been through sexual abuse, and if I'm being honest, like, there were stories that I was hearing on a daily basis that were so personally traumatizing just to like just to hear about, much less to endure. Like, and on a daily basis, like, our team, we were the ones who took the most extreme cases in our city. And so if there was someone who had been through human trafficking, if there was someone who I don't know, like the police like did a sting and like got some kids out of a terrible situation, we were the place that those kids went to get treatment. And so it was a extremely emotionally difficult job to have. For I was there for about a year and a few months. And Viktor Frankl was like this island of sanctuary for me because he just had this substance to stand up against the actual huge tragedies of life. Because he wrote his Logos therapy was was his psychological modality. And for those listening who don't know who Viktor Frankl is, he was a psychiatrist who went through the Holocaust and was in the concentration camps, and he was a Jew that endured and witnessed the horrors of Auschwitz and several other camps and survived. And then on top of that, actually synthesized and thought through a therapy technique inspired by what he saw kept people going in the concentration camp. And like you said, what kept people going was meaning. People could endure hell if they felt like it was genuinely worth it. And
It's so true. It's like the moment you give up, the moment you lose hope is when you actually start losing everything.
It's when that's really the center of it. And I was so inspired by that. Like, he had this in his book when he's talking about, I think it was a story where he was out digging trenches in the ice. And it was train tracks or something, and there was a man weeping because his shoes didn't fit him anymore, and he had to go out into the snow barefoot for the whole day. And he was just reflecting on his frostbitten fingers, and his they were starving too. Like, they just would have barely even a cup of soup a day, and soup is it wasn't even soup. It was just like water
like
with
water.
some boiled vegetables.
Exactly.
And then he said it was the image of his wife in his mind, the memory of his wife, he said, that shined so much brighter than the sun. And it was like all the hell of Auschwitz, all the hell of the Nazi concentration camps could not be dark enough to squelch the memory that he had of his wife. And he just decided, like, if I can just remember her, if her image is still with me, if I can just imagine her face, life is still worth living just so I can recall what she looks like.
And
I
I
was
remember
blown away by that.
And I remember the parts that he would talk about the fact that like he could get back home if he was to get back home, and that like they could have killed his wife. So he was saying that, there's always doubt. There's always like, oh, what if? But he's like, but I only stuck to the hope that I was hoping to get out of it. Sure enough, he got home and his wife wasn't there, which was the really saddest part of the book. But the fact that he didn't like let in those doubts, which like we all have on a daily routine. And, I think it's the doubts that like eventually make you give up, because you just like doubt yourself. You're like, oh, what if this happens? But like, it's like, if that guy could stick to his hope and like make it through Auschwitz, I think we can all do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said. I think and man, I see on a daily basis the doubts. I think I have the fortunate honor of getting to sit with people, and they bring the hardest things that have ever happened to them in their whole life to me, and they welcome me in to a place of problem solving. Sometimes it's problem solving, sometimes it's just reflection, sometimes it's just trying to hold the memory at hand, not even do or fix anything, but just, can I recall it and survive? Like, they bring the most complicated things in their life, and then we hold them together. And what I found is really what Viktor Frankl found. He's the one who learned it and lived it. I get the honor of just getting to receive this, is that the meaning in your life, the things that really matter to you, they ground you through the suffering. And it's not even like they're opposed to the suffering or they make it go away. It's like they make the suffering worth it. They transform the suffering from something that destroys you into something that, I don't know, that makes you, it's not even that it makes you stronger.
It builds you.
It builds you. Yeah. You just become of more substance. And that seems like the most impossible thing, especially when you've been through something horrific like sexual abuse or like Auschwitz. Hearing that sounds cheap. Actually living that out, that sometimes takes months of really just holding that idea in your own heart to get there. But yeah, the idea that maybe like where we start with that, if I'm talking to a client, might be just, okay, well, what are the reasons that you're alive right now? Why do you keep living? Like what is worth it in your life right now? And that might feel so far off and so vague and so like I don't even really know how to grab onto things. But the big question that I zero in on is, okay, you're suffering. The reason that we're suffering is because something matters to us or we're in pain. It's like, what's the counterpoint to that pain? Because we can get really cynical and think that our whole life is meaningless and all of this is just foolish and dumb and why keep going? But you can't talk yourself out of pain. You can't talk yourself out of feeling miserable. And then you just got to ask yourself, it's like, okay, what is misery? Well, misery is in reference to something better. Like there's something I'd rather be feeling than this pain. What is that? Let's just start there. Okay, you're lonely, you're like, let's take the most extreme case. You're lonely, you're by yourself in your apartment, you have no friends, you have a job that you hate, you have no meaningful relationships, you are super critical of yourself, you think that you're just human garbage. Like that's more common than you think for people to be in that much despair. And you're like, well, why is life worth living? And then we start to just almost have an imagination for, okay, well, in very, very small, tiny places, how could it get just even a little bit better? And okay, you I don't know, you hate your room and you hate your apartment that you live in. Like, what's one thing that you could do to make it feel just a little bit more beautiful and intentional?
Yeah.
And that seems like a really, like, I don't know, arbitrary place to start, but it's not. It's
yeah. Another great person I see in your words and in your practice is Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
He's also like, I obsessed with the man. I have his book. I like.
You do, yeah. Yeah,
but,
I learned a lot about Frankl from Peterson too. So I think.
Oh really? Oh
yeah,
I've never heard him talk about him.
Oh, yeah, and Jordan Peterson has lectures on YouTube from his time at University of Toronto. I think it's in his Maps of Meanings class, or maybe in his personality class. It might be in the Existentials in his personality class. They're free on YouTube. And he just he walks through Viktor Frankl and just his work. And Frankl's is a big inspiration for Peterson as well. So yeah, I think those two men have formed a lot of how I think on meaning.
Yeah, and same here. So I would assume that like we think probably similar about, and like we have the same approach to problems, and I can already see that. And like one thing that Jordan Peterson says, he says, like, let's say you're just like sitting home and you're suffering, and he talks about suffering a lot. Jordan Peterson talks about responsibilities and sufferings a lot, but like he just points out, and it's in his book too, it says, just look around and see how you can, in the tiniest bit, make something better. And it's like, you can do that with your environment, you can do that with your relationships, you can do that with your own mind, with your own health. You can kind of just like look around and see, okay, where can I start? Maybe I'm not gonna like deep clean the whole house, but maybe I could just like do my bed. And the same thing goes with your relationships. Like, okay, maybe I can like fix all my problems, or maybe I could just like reach out and be like, hey, good morning, how are you? You know? So like those little things, you can do it with yourself too, with your own problems, with your own like you said, like sufferings that people, there are two types of sufferings, right? Like the ones that are imposed on you and the ones that are kind of like self-inflicted. Like if you're the type of person who, you know, you like very self-critical, I think we all are self-critical, but a lot of it is like unnecessary.
Yeah, well, and it's hard to piece that apart, because I think that, it's hard when you decide that you are the problem and you can't get away from yourself. And there's this, man, that's such a topic in and of itself. But I love what you're saying. I learned that idea from Peterson, and I remember when I first heard it, I actually started putting it into practice with some of my clients and was really amazed to see it work. Like Because what happens, so for example, I do a lot of couples counseling as well.
Yeah.
We just start with some very basic things like, okay, well, you're in this marriage and you're at each other's throats and you're really frustrated with each other, and you don't trust each other. Like, why? Okay, why are you here? Well, we want to see if this will work for the kids. Okay, well, that's fine. Like, why don't we start in some very, very small ways? Like, I want you to find 5 things a week that you're thankful for the other person for, and I just want you to be grateful. That's
I love
just
that.
five different things. It can be thanks for taking out the trash. It doesn't even have to be some big, deep emotional thing.
Yeah.
5 expressions of thankfulness, and that feels like a mountain, right? Of, well, hold on, no, I have a lot of issues with this person. I have a lot of places I don't trust, and there's things that we need to talk through and things we need to work through. Like, absolutely, we're going to get to all of that, and we do. But on top of that, I want to start with just like very, very small gestures of thankfulness.
Yeah.
And what you find is just like even these tiny, minuscule gestures of moving towards something better, they confront the entire animal of what you feel like is wrong. And to say thank you, even for taking out the trash, for some folks just feels overwhelming. And so we just start with once a week, and then we move up to 3 times a week, or move up to 5. And then let's start with some physical touch, not even sexual touch. I just want you to, like, touch their shoulder when you say thank you.
Yeah.
5 times a week. And we just move a little bit closer and closer. And undoubtedly what you find is that it's that foundation of goodwill, of even very polite, almost like a genuine kindness that you give even to a stranger. That actually gives you the infrastructure to start to take on some of the negative stuff, because people come in and it's like, you want to take on the biggest monsters in your relationship. You want to take on the biggest, heaviest topics that you have. But let's do that in the infrastructure of some goodwill, because you're going to walk out of here feeling just miserable if all we do is we just talk about how terrible the relationship is, or how terrible one or the other person is, or how hard the affair was, how hard the gambling addiction was, how hard this and the other thing was. If there's zero goodwill, if there's zero positivity in this whole ordeal, man, you're going to hate counseling. Like, you're going to hate coming here. So yeah,
I feel like that's not going to work. Like, if you're just talking about the problems, like, each person just going to keep defending their own side until the end. And it's like, I don't know where I read this, but it said, every time you enter an argument with someone, each person will leave that argument more convinced than when they started that they're right. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you're just like entering an argument, like whether it's counseling or whatever, you're just giving people, if you're talking about the problems for so long, you're just giving them more chance to defend themselves, and they're going to be more convinced than when they even started that they are absolutely right. But it's like, people are defensive, right, when they start arguing or when there's a problem. But like, the tactic that you're using, it feels like people will drop that being defensive because they will feel a little safer. Like when somebody touches your shoulder kindly, when somebody is grateful for something little that you do, or even like is thankful, or like gives you a little compliment for whatever, that makes you drop your defensiveness and like maybe just like feel a little safe. And then you can approach the problem, right?
Yeah, well said. Yeah, well, and I think both can happen simultaneously, but I like what you're saying, because it's not going to work for both people just to continue to argue and make and become more sure of their own points. Like, some ground rules that I put in place when we start couples counseling is like, okay, before you respond to what the other person says, you have to reflect back what you heard in your own words, and then they have to agree, yep, that's what I said, before you can ask a question. So they say, well, I just feel like I feel like I'm not appreciated by you, and you never really like give me any compliments, and I feel like I get home and I'm pretty much just a roommate to you. And what you want to say is, what? No, I don't do that. I give you compliments, like I said the other day. That's what you want to do. But then I stop you. It's like, no, you can't. Before you defend yourself, you got to summarize what they just said in your own words, and then they have to agree with it. So their first try will sound something like, yep, you feel unappreciated, like I never give you any compliments, and you think that I just hate you or something. And they're like, well, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that I think you hate me. I just said that I don't feel very appreciated. Like, sometimes I feel like you feel indifferent around me.
Right.
And then I make them try again. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, okay. You feel like I'm just indifferent around you. Like, we've just become roommates. Yeah, that's what I said. Okay. Now you can respond. And what that does is you actually start hearing the other people in the conversation, instead of, because what happens is you'll get stuck on that one thing. Like, for example, that in that example, like, oh, you just think that I hate you. And then you're arguing about whether or not you hate the other person when that wasn't even the topic of the conversation in the first place. The
Yeah.
topic was feeling unappreciated. But
Yeah.
because you got so defensive and because you just started blowing up into this huge thing, you start talking about if I hate you or not. And then you never feel like you get anywhere. And that's what gets people stuck, is when you start getting really critical, when you start making all these big accusations, it distracts you from actually being able to talk about the first thing that you wanted to talk about in the first place. So that's
Yeah.
another thing I do. I say no criticism, no accusations. You can talk about how something's affecting you. You can talk about how something's feeling, but you can't talk about you can't name call. You can't use blame. You have to be able to talk about your feelings and then repeat what the other person said in order to continue in the conversation.
Which means you
And
actually did listen. You weren't just
yeah,
like preparing your own answer when the other person was talking, and you're not changing their words, which is something that people do a lot. Like, no, that's not what I said, like, so you're understanding what I said, you're repeating it. Another thing I saw that uh, you get your inspiration from a lot of like great people, and for your work. And this one guy, I don't remember his name, but like you had it written down in one of your websites, and you said that like one of the key ways you make people communicate is I feel. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So that would be the Gottman method. I think that might
Yes,
be what you're
yes,
thinking of. Yeah.
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 So is that let me see if I like, because I kind of want to, like, I don't know exactly what his methods are, but I would
Yeah.
think that that's like, instead of saying uh like you just say, instead of like saying the other person like you did this and this, you say it just made me feel this way, like I felt attacked. Instead of saying like you attacked me, you can say like, oh, I just felt attacked. Is that what that is, or is that a different thing?
No, that's really close. I think so. The way the Gottman method would put that together is you're not necessarily, it's not that you're ignoring things that they do that are hurtful. It's that you're talking about the impact of the thing instead of the thing itself. And so, for example, let's say
Mm,
I'm in an argument with someone and they came home. I mean, just to use our last example, they came home and they just sat down and they just got on their phone. They didn't even say hi to me when they got home from work. So I can be like, hey, you care about your phone more than you care about me. But that's not
mm,
gonna, that's a terrible way to start an argument, because
I know.
the thing the person's gonna jump to is like, no, I don't. And then you're arguing about whether you care about the phone or not more. And that's not what you really want to talk about. What you want to
I
talk about is
know.
feeling unappreciated and feeling kind of ignored when someone got home, when maybe you were looking forward to seeing that person. And so think, okay, what's the impact? When he sat down and he got on his phone, instead of paying attention to me, what did I feel?
Yeah.
Well, I felt pissed. Okay, well, that's not very helpful, because like what's underneath pissed? There's typically three emotions underneath pissed. This isn't Gottman. This is kind of what I add to it, but there's typically sadness, fear, or shame underneath. When you're feeling frustrated, when you're feeling irritated, when you're feeling angry, sadness, fear, or shame. Those are one of the big three. So which one of those did you feel? Well, I felt kind of sad.
Yeah.
Like I wanted him to come over and say hi to me. I
Yeah.
wanted him to come give me a kiss, or I wanted him to come take the baby. I wanted him to help me with dinner. You had all these, and that he just ignored me. I felt really sad by that. So start with that. So say, hey, I felt kind of sad when you walked in and you just sat down on your phone.
Yeah.
I really need you to come say hi to me because I missed you all day. That's a very different way to start than you like your phone more than you like me, don't you?
So different. And like we
Right?
just did not have any of the right trainings to like
Mm.
communicate with each other. It's like rarely anyone's parents ever taught them the right way to communicate, first of all. Like, and
Yeah.
like on top of that, just like Hollywood movies and like everything that we would always watch, like you never really see the right way of people like handling a situation. Like people get in fights and usually they go and drink and party and
Mm.
get with other people. They don't like, okay, let's communicate about our problems. It's like,
Yeah.
it's never like, you never really learn the right way to fix a problem, to communicate. So it's like now you get to like, you're in your 20s, your 30s, 40s, whatever, and you have like all these problems and they just like pop out of nowhere. And you just like have problems with your friends, your relationship, your family, and you're like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Really everything. It's just because like we didn't like learn any of this stuff the right way, and it sucks. But like what you're saying makes so much sense. It just doesn't come naturally to us, you
Totally.
know?
No, I felt that way earlier today. I have this piece of little like Velcro that I was trying to cut so that I could strap together a cord for this podcast for my cable. And I didn't have scissors. And so I'm running around and I found this old can opener and I'm trying to like cut this piece of Velcro with a can opener and it wasn't working at all. And I was getting super frustrated. And then I thought maybe if I shut the door on the Velcro and then pull, it'll like cut like the door and the door frame. And I'm trying 4 or 5 different just random weird ways to cut this Velcro. And then I finally just go across the street and buy some scissors. And I'm like, man,
I was gonna say, did you not have scissors?
Yeah, I didn't have scissors. But man, it is so hard to solve something when you don't have the right tool. Yeah. It is so hard. And when you have the right tool, it's almost like weirdly easy.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, I spent 20 minutes trying to cut this piece of Velcro with a can opener. And I was just using the wrong tool.
It's true, but then there's one main problem with that: ego. Sometimes, like, I don't know if you've ever had this, but this happens to me where like I'm trying to open something, it doesn't open. There comes a guy who's like, let me open it for you. I'm like, no, I have to do it. And that's like an innocent, cute way of ego, but that is ego because like I have to do this the wrong way. And that kind of happens with like people and like problems in your life too. It's like sometimes you might have the right tool, but your ego gets the best of you and you just choose not to use them.
Totally.
You just choose to go with your less evolved, less elevated self who gets
I think
emotional.
That's such a great point. Even with this skill that we were just talking about, like, I think what's so hard about the I feel statement is that you're angry and you feel just like you're angry. Your partner's sitting there on his phone. Yeah. Well, okay. So your partner's sitting there on his phone and you're pissed. You're like, you don't want to sit down and be like, listen, I'm sad because I'd rather you come in and say hi. You don't want to do that. You want to be like, you feel justified and be like, hey, jerk. Like, you know, look at you. Look at like you're sitting there being rude and I don't know. You want to get vengeance. You feel that ego slip in. I don't know. Like even with the can opener, why did I struggle with that piece of Velcro at a can opener for 20 minutes instead of just going by and getting the scissors? Because I thought I could do it. And there's so I think you're totally right. Ego can totally get in the way.
Yeah, and sometimes like with people, you just want to get your anger out rather than fix the problem, right? Because I feel like anger is such a huge emotion, and in our like just primal brain, it comes before like problem solving, right? Yep. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna get this anger out, you know, and that comes before, let me actually see what's the right way of going, because like that's just like it has more power, more push to it, to just like 100%. Say what you want to say, and it like has a kick and it like, you know, stings a little, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like even 100%. Though you could have the right tools, like, you know, you're not doing the right thing, you're not helping the situation or anyone, but it's like, I don't know, man, it just sometimes feels good.
Well, you know, and I think so Gottman talked about this. Gottman's old, he's like old now, but he was a researcher back, I think he started in the 70s or 80s, trying to put together a counseling method, because the counseling method at the time was kind of really based off of just, I don't know, trying to vent and get your emotions out there. And if you could just say everything, if you could just vent, then everything would be fine. And there was like therapy techniques where they give each other like foam paddles, and partners would try to like beat each other with these foam hammers and paddles, and you're supposed to feel better afterwards. And if you could just get out all your anger, then you could get to the real stuff and you'd be fine.
How did that work?
Turns out that didn't work at all. Turns out like people just beat each other with these foam mallets, and
they wish it was metal.
Yeah, they just left angrier than they did going in. And that's something Gottman found, is that venting doesn't help.
I don't think so either, because like I feel like when you vent, you just transfer that energy and you just talk more about it, and it just becomes more prominent in your brain. I'm not saying you should suppress everything, but I personally realized that when I vent, it becomes bigger and more because it's like out there, you know.
100%. Yeah, and they've, you know, another thing that Gottman's found was how you start a fight 90% of the time is going to be how you end a fight. So if you're starting in really intense and going in real hot with like, you care about that phone more than you care about me, man, the chances that that's going to end in like a hug and like everything working out and be like, sorry, babe, I'll try to make sure to like, it's just not going to happen. And so the question is like, well, what do you want out of this interaction? Like, cause you could go in there feeling really justified, feeling, you know, rage, and just like, I just want to dig. I just want to stomp on them. I just want, because I'm right. But I don't know, if you were to pause and step back, it's like, no, you want to connect with them.
Yeah. It takes so much to do that. It takes so much to do that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you
Anger is covering
agree?
a world of sadness,
Yeah. Yeah. Like we have like all these like fears and insecurities inside of us, and like emotions just like take the best of you all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard, honestly. Okay. So
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's great.
we have not even gone to any of the questions I have ready for you, just because
We're having such great
this
conversation.
is
Yeah.
such a great conversation. So, I wanted to ask you, what's the difference between a psychotherapist, which is what you are, and a psychologist?
Yeah. So psychologists went and got their PhD. And so there's three
Wait,
kinds of,
really? I thought with a
yep.
master's you can be a psychologist.
No. Yeah.
Damn it.
Psychologists, you can only do a PhD. Yeah. So there's three big titles. There's psychiatrist, psychologist, and then psychotherapist, or like mental health counselor. Those are synonymous. And so a psychiatrist is someone who went to med school, so they can prescribe like antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. They can do stuff like that. Some psychiatrists also do psychotherapy, and so they'll sit with you in a chair and talk to you about your problems. Psychologists, they didn't go to med school, but they
Yeah.
got a PhD. And sometimes there's clinical psychologists, which do research. They sit in a lab, they kind of test different methods. They have an idea about maybe a therapy technique that might be good, and so they try it out on a couple hundred people and see if it works or if it doesn't work, and try to come up with differences. A lot of them teach at universities. Or you have a counseling psychologist who mostly sits in the chair and talks to people and does one-on-one clinical work, with people.
Right.
So then, well, there's also a PsyD. I won't get into all that. There's a few other little offshoots, and then what I am is a psychotherapist or a mental health counselor. Same thing. And I got a master's degree. And so I spent 3 years studying, and then had a year internship after that, and then 3,000 hours of supervision for sitting in the chair and talking to people about mental health problems. So I can't prescribe medication. I don't have a doctor next to my name, but I am trained in all the psychotherapy techniques and treatment. And so that's what I do.
What was I going to say? You can also be a PA and prescribe medication. You can't technically call yourself a psychiatrist. You would still be like a mental health associate, something like that. But you can
but you do a psychiatry residency if you do that. You're right. Yeah. So there's people who and then also go on to get their doctors in nursing, and so they would technically be doctors and can prescribe, and they do psychiatry residencies. Yeah, there's a bunch of offshoots. There's also a PsyD, which means that you do a PhD, but you don't do like this big research project and do a bunch of lab work. Instead, you kind of focus more on learning skills about counseling, and you sit in, like sitting in the chair and actually talking to people. So it's less academic. It's more focused on your skills and actually doing therapy. And so a lot of people go the PsyD route. You're still a doctor in that case. So yeah, I think if anyone out there is considering being a counselor or being in the psychology field, it'd be a good thing to kind of narrow down the path that you want to take at the very beginning, because it's a different track. Like, so for example, I got a master's degree. A lot of people right out of their bachelor's degree go right into PhD study instead of getting their master's first. And so you can get a 5-year program and go and become a psychologist, or you can do a 3-year program and just become a mental health counselor or a psychotherapist. And so I made a video called Becoming a Psychotherapist on YouTube, where I kind of break down the whole like education track if you were thinking about maybe becoming a counselor. And I break down all the different options and give my opinions on all that.
Right. So you studied psychology, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling. Nice. With an emphasis on psychopathologies and specifically how mental health disorders can disrupt stuff. So you can get your master's in a few different things. Another route would have been to get your marriage and family master's, which means that you focus mostly on doing like marriage counseling and working with kids and working with family systems. And so you can kind of focus more on the kind of scientific brain disorder stuff, which is what I did, or you can focus more on like the family and the marriage and kids, which is what a lot of my colleagues have done. You can also get a social work master's.
Right. Yeah. So you
a lot of different paths.
Of course. Yeah. So you've worked with kids and you've worked with like parents too. And which one were more difficult to work with? I wonder.
The parents. So always the parents. Yeah. It's tough. Well, and I should say what's harder, I think, is working in foster care. Um, because what's helpful is when you have a parent that's totally on board and is really wanting their kid to grow and to be okay, and they want to be involved in the counseling, like that's the
Yeah,
best case scenario. That's just great. And
yeah,
then it's more like a team effort. It's you, the parent, and the kid, and you're all working towards the same goal. When you have a parent that kind of drops their kid off as like a glorified version of daycare, but maybe they'll learn some lessons and obey them more, that's a bummer.
not involved enough.
Yeah, it's not that it doesn't work. It's just usually slower and it's a little bit more difficult. And then you have kids who are in foster care, living in group homes, and it's really challenging because a lot of what kids need to make real progress in any sort of mental health recovery is
Yeah,
active adults that really love them and that are working to build a really safe and
yeah,
reinforce the lessons they're learning in counseling in their day-to-day life. And so,
yeah. Those
yeah,
are
it's
the kids
challenging.
that I'm planning on working with soon when I get
Oh
my
yeah. So what's
master's.
your career path? What are you up to? You're doing this awesome podcast, but do you have any desire to be in the mental health field?
Yeah, so I'm studying psychology right now. I studied
Mhm.
political science for 3 years because I
Right.
was planning on going to law school, and I was one semester away from doing that. I realized it is not like anything I hold close to my heart at all. Like I was always
Mm.
reading psychology books on the side, but I just never really thought about like doing psychology as a career.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like my family always told me like law school, law school, law school, and I was like from like when I was a kid, so I was like, yeah, law school. So then, so then I like I got older and like it just like the classes were not interesting to me. Like we had a whole semester about war. It was just like not something that was
Really engaging.
congruent with my soul or like what I was
Yeah.
into. And
Mm.
soon after I realized I actually met with this guy at a party who was like an older guy and he was a really successful lawyer. And he told me, I really don't see you being a good lawyer, which I was like insulted. I
Mm.
was like, why do you say that? Like, because like I'm a blonde girl, like instantly like becoming like defensive. And he goes, no, it's because like I feel like you have such a gentle soul, and like as a
Mm.
lawyer you kind of have to like almost sell your soul in a way that like sometimes you find out your client is not innocent and you still have
Mm.
to defend them because they're your client.
Mm.
And so it's like you're working for the wrong side and you have to keep going. And
Wow.
he was like, I
Yeah.
just like don't see you doing that.
Mm.
And I was like, no, I can't do that. I can't. And he was like, yeah, if
Mm-hmm.
you want to be a good lawyer, like you have to keep like defending the person who did the wrong thing. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. So that pushed
Right.
me back 3 years because I
Mm.
did study that for 3 years.
Mhm.
Um, and I just switched my major to psychology. I changed my school.
Yeah.
Again, it like pushed me back a little, but very happy I made that decision. One of my
Mm.
best decisions ever. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm working towards my master's now, and uh, thinking to do like um, between like cognitive and personality and clinical. Like those are my three main
Mhm.
interests. For
Yep.
example, uh, the Carl Jung and the Myers-Briggs test. Like I have
Mhm.
a lot of my guests take the test,
Yep.
and we like kind of like talk about it a little if we have time. So
Mm.
yeah, like
Fun.
cognitive
That's awesome.
functions and personality um, typography, I guess like that kind of thing is I'm
Mm.
very interested in that. So yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, and it's such a fulfilling career. I hope you
It
just
is.
love it. And especially even just
Yeah.
starting with the political science and pursuing that career and being a lawyer, you're going to have these cool competencies and skills and insights, and it just takes a lot
Yeah.
of tenacity to even like start a career like that. So I'm excited to see where that takes you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm actually happy that I studied political science for a while. Like I understand the Constitution a lot better. I did come from another
Mhm.
country, so it was good for me to like understand how this country is actually like ran and like understand the history a little better, understand the laws and the rules and like who makes the laws and like what so like like the introductory stuff that like you really do need
Mhm.
to know anyways.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm glad I did it. It just pushed me back a little,
Mhm.
but oh, okay.
Well, it'll make sure that you're a great advocate for your clients too, because what a
Right.
lot of people don't know is a lot of immigrants have a really hard time just in their mental health coming here. Like,
Yeah.
especially if you were a refugee. Like at my internship, we had a lot of people who had experienced war torture and had severe PTSD from just losing family members in war. And so you go in there as a PTSD specialist, right? Helping people with severe trauma, but then they have a world of legal issues just trying to establish themselves in this country. And as a, being a refugee, there's just a world of red tape. And so I often was consulting with lawyers and just trying to advocate for my clients and help them be able to access different resources and make sure that they could just get the basic needs satisfied, much less their mental health and PTSD and flashbacks and nightmares. And so I think you'll find, that's super helpful. It's a great skill to have under your belt.
Yeah. And I really want to I really want to establish a way for myself where I'm like financially so okay that I can just do my work for people that are not really going to be able to like I want to do it for like the kids we were talking about, or like for all these people that like really need the help, but then it's like, it's so hard to make money when you want to be a good person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or unless you could like do them hand in hand, where you could like, do like a little bit of like volunteer work, and then like you could have like your own private practice, stuff like that. There are different ways to do it. So I'll
there's a lot
definitely
of people
figure
who
it
need
out.
help. I think what I found in Spokane is that everyone is on a wait list. Like there's such a huge need for therapists that are qualified and really can help. And I think what's hard, so I have like a pretty long wait list right now to get in to see me for therapy. And I wish I could help all these people. And so I think a lot of my focus has been on making these videos and making workshops and creating access to a lot of mental health content online. And then I have lots of conversations with clinicians, and both in learning and trying to share what I've learned, just to make sure that everyone's getting the best treatment that they can. So there's a team effort there that's really important, even as clinicians, which is huge.
Right. That's great. So I know that you were also planning to become a pastor. And you turned into a psychotherapist instead. And so I'm really curious as to like, how did that happen? What turned you against, because you mentioned this in your videos that like you turned against the church and the Bible and even Christianity. And so I kind of wanted to see like, how did that happen? Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a long story. I think it's the short version is that I was on staff at a church, and I was doing a lot of stuff with youth and college kids. I was running a college internship, and it was super fun. I loved it. It was a great job, and getting to hang out with a lot of college kids and just kind of build some community and centered around faith and help people really connect with God. It was such a meaningful job. And then I had a conflict with our senior pastor at the church that I didn't really know how to bring up or talk about with other people. And a lot of that story is pretty personal, but it culminated in me getting really resentful and angry at my pastor and frustrated. And then me feeling kind of uncomfortable and out of place at the church, not really knowing how to be on staff at this church and hold this frustration and resentment towards its leader. And I kind of, it all culminated in me quitting almost impulsively and me cutting off contact with a lot of people. And I think what happens, this is pretty normal just psychologically in any domain, is you generalize when you feel hurt, when you feel in danger, when you don't feel safe, or when you feel angry, you generalize. So for example, we're not just scared of poisonous snakes. We're scared of all snakes. Like, we're not just scared of poisonous spiders. We're scared of all spiders, even spiders that we know won't bite us, like daddy long legs. We don't want them crawling around on us. Like, we generalize. And so I think in that season of life, this was when I was like 24-ish, 25. I generalized almost 30, 29. Yeah.
Okay.
29. So I generalized my frustration towards that pastor, towards pastors generally. And then I got mad, not just at that church, but the church generally. Oh. And then especially after leaving, I don't know, it's not uncommon, especially when you're just trying to shift what you believe about something, that you don't really know how to talk about it. You don't really know how your beliefs are different and how they change. You just feel it in your gut. Like there's just things that you say you believe, but then there's this emotional experience that Like, it just doesn't match. It just doesn't click.
Yeah.
And you don't know what to do with that. And so I didn't really know how to explain it or what to do, but I just stopped going to church. And I was pretty frustrated. And I started my master's in counseling around that point too. And so counseling, when you're in your master's in counseling, there's a whole like built-in worldview to counseling psychology that's something like postmodern, self-helpy,
Yeah.
you know, like self-actualized,
Right.
justice-oriented. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's like this secular worldview that
Yeah.
is kind of baked in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the psychological community is really quick to be like, yeah, we don't push our views on other
Yeah.
people. We don't, we let people have their own thing. But I think people, there's a little bit of dishonesty there. I think people smuggle in their worldview way more often than you'd think. And that's why it's really important to pick a therapist you align with, because it's not a philosophically neutral field. So I started kind of taking on like this just postmodern secular way of looking at the world, and found that I was super anxious, like way more depressed than I was even before. And I don't know if that's everyone's experience. I've seen it a lot with my friends, that when you have a conflict or someone lets you down or you feel a betrayal, and you kind of tag church and Christianity as the victimizer.
Right. Because
Not
there's
just
this
that
like,
person.
right. Like, do you feel like you had this like cognitive dissonance, right? Because you had like this like external difference with like how you felt on the inside, right? And you were like, they don't match.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. It felt I don't know. I let go of all this religious shame. I got really critical of my faith and the Bible and church, and I was like, oh yeah, all that stuff about sin, and that's all so binding and shameful. And why did God have to kill Jesus on a cross, and why did he need blood sacrifice? That's so
Right?
tribal.
Sounds so
Gross.
aggressive.
Yeah, and aggressive and terrible. And I don't know. And what happens too when you're in a place of resentment or frustration, you see this like in marriage counseling often. It's like the bad stuff gets 5 times as big and the good stuff gets super, super small, right? And so I started just sinking into these caricatures of Christian faith and started misrepresenting it, and just, straw manning the whole thing and getting really cynical about the whole ordeal.
Yeah.
And the more I did that, the more I got aggressive and angry towards Christianity, my faith, the more anxious and depressed I got. And the more I separated myself from church, and hypothetically was living into this place of freedom, living into this place liberated from all the shame of my religious upbringing, I found that actually led to profound emotional distress and loneliness. Gosh, so much loneliness. And I got to a point where I just realized personally for myself that I actually really love Jesus a lot, and felt like I really have a relationship with him. And my values and what holds up my life is really based on the gospel. And I don't understand why, and it was really confusing. And so what I did is my wife had already kind of started going back to church, because she was really gracious and kind with me kind of throughout this whole process I was going through. But she was like, I know you don't like church, but I like church, so I'm going. You don't have to go, but I'm going. And so I started going with her, and she was going to this really intense, like Calvinist conservative church. Of those of you who don't know, it's one of the more conservative expressions of Christian church is this Calvinist Baptist world. And it probably, you couldn't find a church I disagreed with more. Maybe that's an exaggeration. There was so much that I disagreed with,
because it's so extreme, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. And
anything that's extreme is like, nothing.
Yeah, it's hard to take in.
Yeah.
And so I went with Paige, and I disagreed with the sermons profoundly, and I was super grumpy and kind of hated it. And then I don't know why, but I just kind of started. There's this men's group that met at like 6 a.m. on Tuesdays, full of old Calvinist men, and I just expected that they'd be the most dogmatic, like terribly rigid, awful people. And there was a part of me that just wanted to prove to myself that I was right, that this whole thing was just so awful and terrible. So I started attending this group expecting a lot of judgment. And what I found was that these men were just so gentle and kind towards me.
Oh.
And they saw that I was angry. They saw that I was frustrated. And they'd listen. They wouldn't interrupt me. They wouldn't shame me. I'd go on these big rants about how everything that they believe is silly and dumb, and and oppressive and terrible. And they were respectful and kind and gracious and genuinely loved and cared about me. And that was really frustrating. I I expected them to be the villain, and they refused to play the villain. I think they just saw that I was searching and having a hard time, and they just felt like a bunch of grandpas and dads just kind of coming around me and just being like, hey, it's okay. Like, we're not going to downplay what we believe, and we know that offends you, but you always have a place here. And that was really healing. And so I spent about a year going to this group full of these old Calvinist dudes that loved me. And
you guys became
it was really restorative, right? And I think it was in that space that I realized, I don't think I'm mad at church. I think I'm mad at that pastor.
Yeah, that person.
And when that actually clicked with me, and I started just to work through that resentment, and I could parse apart what were the parses that were maybe problematic and sinful or bad, and then what were the parts that are actually okay. I kind of felt a part of me kind of come back alive, and I felt more at peace, and I felt so much more restful. And I was like, oh, I think I really do have a relationship with God here. And and I actually ended up not continuing to go to that church because I'm not a Calvinist and I didn't really agree with their theology. Even when I like came back around, it was, I don't agree with you guys still, but like, I still am in contact with a few of those guys, and they still pray for me.
They definitely served their purpose in your life.
Yeah. They were a necessary rest stop. And so now I'm actually back at that same church that I was on staff at and that I left.
Oh, no way. So is that pastor there too?
No, so that pastor actually ended up moving on to pastor a different church in the denomination. And my direct boss at the time, he was the youth pastor at the time. He was my direct boss when I was on staff at that church. He became the senior pastor. And so I went to him and I just apologized for leaving and kind of told him the story about like why that was so hard for me and kind of what my journey was like. And he was like tearfully like, I'm like, I had no idea you're going through that, and I'm so sorry, and I should have been there with you. And we just had this incredible like reunion, and just like old wounds being healed, and
that's the best.
And it feels like and I'm back home. It feels
back
whole.
Better.
Yeah, and and I think what was cool about that too is I really like did put my faith under the ringer and really kind of evaluated all these different theological points really intensely. And so I feel like I actually understand my faith in a lot more of a profound way. And I feel like I had more solid answers for a lot of those things that I was really critical of. And so, I don't know. That's a version of that story. It's, and in the meantime, I became a therapist. So I've stayed a therapist, I like this job a lot, and I think I get to help a lot of people, even if they're not Christians. I get to help them. So that feels really good.
That was a good existential crisis for you then.
Yeah, I needed. Everyone's got to have a good existential crisis. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have them like once every 2 months. Definitely.
But I don't know. I guess that's Are you religious at all?
I wasn't raised religious. My family, like nobody's really religious in my family, but for some reason, I was like when I was really young, like it's like that whole like searching for meaning. Whenever I think from the age of like 9 to like 16, I would like pray every day. I would wake up like at 5 a.m. to pray. I would do it 5 times a day. I would fast. I would read a Quran every day. Like my family was in shock. Like they would look at me and they're like, where is she getting this from? Like nobody in our family does this. Like, why is she like this? They're like, is this a phase where like other kids go through like an emo phase and she's just going through a really religious phase? And I would like drag my other friends to like come pray with me and like read the Quran with me. Like I don't have no idea why. And I just like
you had a deep appetite for the existential, a deep appetite.
Exactly. For the spiritual. And I was so young too, in every other sense, I was like such a late bloomer, like didn't put makeup on, didn't have a boyfriend until like way later in life. Like in everything else, I was like completely behind. But like in other things, like in like really strange, like little other things. Like I was a lot more ahead.
Wow.
So anyways, I got to the age of like, I think like 17 or 18 where like, you know, I actually talked about this on one of my other episodes with my anthropology professor from back in school, where I like watched this documentary about religions. And it was this guy who would just like go around the world and study different religions, like in different like little villages of Africa. And it just kind of like basically boiled down to, okay, people do all these things, like, and I'm sure you know it. It's like we need to find meaning, we need to find a reason, we need to know that we're gonna be okay. We need to know that like at the end of the day, like no matter what happens, like maybe a lot of it we don't have control over, and like there is somebody who has control over it and they're looking after us, and that just makes us feel good and like fuzzy and safe. And so that sense of meaning and security is really like why all these people like do all these like different rituals every day. And like some of those rituals were really crazy, like this one village, like everybody would like line up and bang their heads against the wall to rid themselves of shame. And that was their ritual. It looks crazy to us, but to them that was meaningful. So I was like, okay, so that for like in that age that like made a lot of sense to me. And I studied Buddhism, and I studied a little bit of Bible because I wanted to compare it to my religion. And what I realized is that it's all the same shit. It's all the exact same purpose. And I figured that I disagree with a lot of what's in Quran, and a lot of it made me really angry. Like very, very upset. Like I felt betrayed that like God would say this like about women. Like this is so unfair, you know? And so I stopped it altogether. And then my same anthropology professor, you know, like I kind of like, he put me on this route of just like everything from a science perspective, and anything that's not proven by science, like we kind of like don't believe in it. So then I had this like atheist phase, which was my saddest, most depressed, coldest era of my life. And I just realized I don't need proof for a higher being. I don't need it to be scientifically proved. I just know in my heart that it makes sense for something. I don't know if it's God or Jesus or like whatever you want to call it. I just know that there's like a higher power, and it just makes sense to me. So then, so then I just kind of just like chose spirituality instead of religion. And yeah, just read books and like every day just find new things that are meaningful, and just, you know, get a little crazy about it.
Yeah. I think it was Jordan Peterson who really helped me kind of see just our psychological need for that.
Yes.
And he made I don't know, especially when I was kind of prematurely cynical about just a lot of religion, he just had a way of explaining, like he did this series on the biblical stories. That was profound. And it just made so much of the stuff I was really quick to be cynical about. He's like, this is why people believe this, and this is the utility of it. And here, if you actually think of it this way, it makes so much sense. And I was like, oh, I actually this kind of cold atheist kind of all that religious stuff is just tribal and unnecessary and unevolved, like, and that accompanying anxiety. Maybe that isn't as informed and transcendent as I thought it was. That's a great story.
He has this one answer he always gives when people ask him, do you believe in God? He says, I act as if there is a God. So he doesn't say, yes, there is a God, or no, there is no God, because technically nobody really knows. But he says, I act as if there is one. And I think that's a great answer. I just love how he like answers everything. Like he has such a way with words. He never says the wrong thing.
I think he's masterful. Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant man.
Thanks for sharing that with me.
So then, okay, we have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
We have time a little. Okay, so I want to talk about a few of the things that you're just such an expert in. For example, like you have a few really a lot of your TikTok videos are very popular. Like your social media in general is very popular, which I'm glad people are finally starting to gravitate towards this kind of content, because it's like good for you. Like, for example, you have this one video where you say if your partner is bringing up stuff that happened in the past, like 2 years ago, 5 years ago, last month, like, why do they do that? Like, if like we already had it in the past and we're like moved past it and we talked about it, why does it keep coming back? Like, why does she or why does he like keep bringing up that problem that happened in the past? What does that mean, and what do you think should be done about that?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think in that video that you're referencing, I talk about how, you know, if people keep bringing stuff up that's happened in the past, it's because it hasn't healed yet. And a lot of us kind of think that, well, you know, what heals it is just saying sorry and kind of deciding where the blame goes, but that's not the case. It's actually rebuilding trust in the midst of that, I don't know, in the midst of that conflict, and fully hearing how that conflict affected you. Like, you know, I think this was inspired in part by doing a lot of couples counseling and then realizing, particularly with men, with women too, but particularly with men, that they would feel frustrated. Like, why are we going back in the past and talking about all these terrible things I did? I feel like all we do in couples counseling is just talk about how terrible of a partner I've been. And this just sucks. Like, why do you keep holding on to all these old grudges? And they were really quick to kind of moralize and be like, yeah, you're just stuck in the past and you're not forgiving and you're not moving on. Like, gosh, like every tiny little thing, I'm under the microscope and you're just not letting it go. And so in part, this was kind of a quest of mine to just figure out, like, okay, what's happening there? Like, it seems like there's actually real emotional hurt that in my experience, the people that I was talking to, that the women were really facing and holding on to. And it doesn't seem like it's a moral deficit in them to be frustrated that things happened in the past. What is that transformation like? How do those two things meet? And what I concluded was, it's not merely that you have to say, yep, sorry, I did that, you're right, like, my bad, I won't do it again. It's, you have to have a full understanding of how that behavior affected the other person before the sorry really even matters. Because you could say, like, hey, when you made that comment that you didn't, I don't know, that like, let's pick something intense, like when you made that comment that I looked fat, you know, and that I needed to work out more, like that made, and that really hurt. And then, you know, he could say, well, I said, I'm sorry. What more do you want from me? I'm sorry. I said that. I won't say it again. And it's like, no, that's not.
Gotta try harder, buddy.
that doesn't do anything. Like, the point is, here's the follow-up question you got to ask is, like, what was it like when I called you fat? How did that make you feel? And that's, of course, the last thing. Yeah. And that's the last thing you want to ask, because it feels like you're walking into the mouth of the beast. But that's where, where the meaning is. What did it feel like when I called you that? How did that make you feel that I felt about you generally? How did that affect our relationship? How did that affect how vulnerable or how trusting you could be with me? And what were the fears that aroused in you? Were there times when you were a kid when you were called fat? Did that evoke anything from your past that was hard for you? Like, actually exploring that domain with curiosity. Like, how did what I did, like, let's look at the ramifications, the cascade effect of that thing that I said, because I want to know every nook and cranny of how that affected you. And only after that, in a real honest way, can I say, I'm so sorry that I made you feel that way.
When you understand it, when you actually understand it.
And I think that people are really quick to just be like, okay, I'm sorry. And it's like, oh, that's not it. It's, you actually have to see the devastation. You have to take it all in. And that takes courage. That takes a strong integrity to be able to hold all that.
For sure.
That people work up to. That doesn't happen instantly. It takes time. And it takes time to accept that that's actually the pathway to redemption there, because I don't know. I've seen the blank expressions on men's face when I suggest that. They're like, what? Like, yeah, you know, that terrible thing happened. Ask her how it made her feel. Like, are you trying to get
and he's just hating you?
Are you trying to make things worse? Like,
you're on her side.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, no, I think that damage is already there, whether you know it or not. You're just, are you willing to look at it or not? It's like, oh, me bringing that up and asking her, that's going to make everything worse. I'm like, no, everything is already that bad. You just don't know.
Yeah. I don't know where I read this, but it said, people don't remember the words you said. They remember how you made them feel. So a lot of times when people argue and they're like, no, you said this, and he's like, no, I didn't say this, I said this. Doesn't matter what you said. That's how it made that person feel, right? So that's like also what you're pointing at. It's like, okay, let's get to the root of it, and the root of it is how it made the other person feel. It doesn't really matter like what words were used, or like what, like, because people get so caught up in just like the wording, and like that like gets so much like in arguments. It happens to me all the time too. It's just like we get so just caught on the wording. You said this, you said this, you said this. Doesn't matter. This is how it is.
And I think a lot of people's response to that might be, well, why should I apologize for you misunderstanding me? Like, okay, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Like, that wasn't my intention. Why in the world is that my fault? Like, I'm not responsible for your feelings. Like, that would be the response, right?
Yeah.
And what I say in response to that is just like, okay, like, let's just take a pragmatic take at this. Like, okay, sure, let's say that you didn't mean to make her feel that way. I believe you. I'm not saying that I think you're secretly this malicious, terrible person. Like, let's just say that you didn't mean to make her feel that way. Let's even say she misunderstood you, and that she's in the wrong here. Like, pragmatically, like, don't you want to know how you're coming off? Don't you want to know how your behavior is affecting her? Well, she just needs to realize that's not how I meant it. No, that's cheap. Like take a second and actually take a step back and look, what did she need in that moment? And that usually sets people back. Like, what do you mean? It was like, okay, what should you have said in that moment? What would have really reassured her in that moment? I'm using her and him just because of the example. It could be the other way too.
Yeah.
But like, what did she need in that moment? Like, well, I wasn't trying to call her fat. I just thought that swimsuit didn't look good on her. I just thought it squeezed in a way that made her look fat. I didn't say she was fat. It's like, okay, like, what did she need in that moment? I don't know. I'm not responsible for her feelings. Totally. Fair enough. What do you think would have been really beneficial and really would have added to her confidence in that moment?
Oh my God.
Yeah, right? And people are that, sincere, like, or stubborn, they really do sink into that defensiveness. What did they need? Well, they probably needed some reassurance that they look great. They probably needed someone to just not not be critical of them and just be like, oh, baby, look awesome. I'm excited. Let's go to the lake. Like,
but wouldn't that be a lie? So are you supposed to lie? Like, if she looks fat in a swimsuit.
That's a good retort. So here's the reality is like, what's the goal? Like, what's your goal in something like, okay, do I look great in this swimsuit? Like, what's the criteria that you're trying to work with? You're trying to be like, do I look like the greatest supermodel on the planet, like in this swimsuit? Like, I don't know. Hold on. Let me think of how to phrase this. There's you don't want to lie. No, I agree with you. You don't want to lie.
But on the same, will also trap you because they're like, oh no, you can be honest. Please be honest. Like, do I look good in this? Be honest. Be honest, fellas. Don't be honest.
I'm not saying lie. I think what in the example that I was using in my mind there, there's spaces where we say things that are uncourteous and maybe sloppily uncourteous in a way that wasn't like, hey, do these pants look good on me? I'm not telling you have to say they look great. Do I look fat in this swimsuit? I'm not saying, yep, you look super skinny, even though you think that it's ill-fitting. I'm not saying lie to them, but I'm saying that in those places where you realize, oh man, I really misstepped and I said something that was offensive and hurtful, and you're trying to double down on the fact that you didn't mean to hurt them that way. The thing that you could do in that moment is go back to, okay, what should I have said in that moment that would have been more supportive?
Just be charming.
Like, there's ways that you can say like, hey, I think you look better in other swimsuits. Like, you could say that. Like, there's other swimsuits that I think you look better in. There's like, I know you got that swimsuit and you're really excited about it. You want to know my honest opinion on it? It's not my favorite one. I think the blue one looks better. Like, there's other ways that you can say like some things fit better than others. Like, I don't know. There's always clothing that makes every body type look bad. Like, that doesn't mean that the body's bad. That just means that like certain clothing, like even the skinniest models, there's some fabric and clothing that doesn't look good on them. True. Like, that's not you don't have to center it in on, oh, this is because you're overweight and you should be skinnier. Like, that's a pointless thing to double down on. So I just think, I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. And I feel like a lot of like men who are successful in their relationship is like, they just know how to be charming. And I think like a charming man is the kind of guy who knows what to say in what moment. And a smart, charming guy knows that in this moment, it's not actual honesty that she wants from me. She wants to feel beautiful and confident so we can get out of
Mm-hmm.
this freaking door and like go where we need to be. Because then she's just going to keep changing for the next hour. So, like, yes, she's saying, do I look in this? Be honest. But you have to know, as a smart, charming guy, that in this moment, it's not really honesty that she's looking for. It's a compliment that she's looking for. It's me giving her the confidence so that she can walk out the door all, feeling good and beautiful. So, it's like for you to like in that moment not be like, actually that makes you look fat, because no.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think and that's where before I was saying like, okay, well, what's the point? What's your goal here? What are you trying to communicate?
Exactly.
I think you're right. Your Cinderella is like, what's her goal? Her goal is to feel some affirmation, or like she genuinely wants to look good. She doesn't want to go out in an outfit where she feels like she shouldn't be confident in it. Like, and I think my point is there's ways that you can be honest, but also be tactful and understand like what she's
Yeah,
like.
I agree.
Yeah.
If it's
Like,
hideous, don't tell her. If it's hideous, if it's
yeah,
terrible,
yeah,
that would be a big lie. But if it's
yeah.
like, all right, like whatever, it's not the best thing, but it's not like terrible. I was like, okay, let's just go. Like, it's fine. Yeah, you're beautiful. But say it like you
Yeah.
mean it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, I think, just pressure in our culture around like just weight and image and just body types that really creates a complicated atmosphere for relationships. And when people want to feel
Yeah.
beautiful, sometimes they mean, do I fit the cultural ideal? And I think there's a whole game there. There's a whole world of things that are complicated and problematic. Like
Yeah.
what we're telling somebody when we say that they're beautiful is just like, my heart jumps out towards you and I love you and I find
You.
you worlds of engaging. And sometimes that
That's so
means,
cute. Yeah.
I don't know, that sometimes that means, yes, you look like a supermodel on this beach. But when we're 70, there's not going to be any supermodel, good looks, but she's still beautiful.
Yeah.
Like beauty has to transcend um how this dress squeezes in which places. Like,
Right.
it has to be something more meaningful than that.
Right.
Because all of us, no matter what, are going to reach a place where we don't fit the body standard of the culture. And that doesn't mean that we're not beautiful anymore.
Yeah. And I think like if all else fails, you can always make sure that the other person looks beautiful to you. Because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if you're going out with your man, with your boyfriend, whatever, or as a guy, because I mean, like, guys ask like, does this look good too? I think, do they?
Yeah, we do. Oh, we will look good. Yeah, for sure.
But they might not be as emotionally invested in the answer they receive, like women
Mm-hmm.
mostly are. But you could always be like, you can make it like about you, because at the end of the day, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So it's like, okay, if she is not, as you said, like a supermodel type, just make her feel like to you she is. Just make her
Mm-hmm.
feel like to you she's beautiful,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well put. Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so we were talking about apology. We might have actually touched on this. Let me know if you have any more to add. What should an apology be about, and how to apologize the right way?
Yeah. Well, and I think we were just talking about how you have to understand how something affected someone, right?
Right.
And so when I'm thinking about apologies, I'm thinking, okay, how did this make this person feel when I said that?
Mm-hmm.
And you put it really nicely too. It's not just about, okay, well, what was my intention, but it's also about the effect.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the flip side of, well, okay, I didn't mean it that way, you could say like, maybe I should have shown up for you in a more affirmative way. Maybe I should have shown up for you in a way that was more encouraging, that was more kind, that was more tactful, that was more present. Like, especially when you don't remember the event. Like if they're frustrated for something you don't remember saying, I mean, you can be honest and say that. You could say like, oh, it sounds in that moment that I should have been more supportive. I'm sorry. Like, how did it make you feel when I wasn't supportive, or when I didn't catch that moment, when I did that thing that was so hurtful? Tell me about how that affected you. So that's where those apologies really start to bring healing, is when you have a full understanding of what actually affected the other person. And that's when they start to matter. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'd say.
I'm sorry it made you feel that way, or I'm sorry you felt that way, is not an apology.
Doesn't help. Mm-mm.
That's not an
But I
apology.
think what people are trying to do is be honest, right? It's like, because I think that's, where we've been kind of exploring and kind of wandering around. It's like, okay, how do you be honest when you don't remember? How do you be honest when you don't see it that way? Okay, so I felt like what you said, you were just being rude. It was like, okay, I wasn't trying to be rude. And that's the solution to that. I think that's helpful is, okay, it sounds like you needed me to be more supportive in that moment, and I wasn't. It sounds like you needed me to be more affectionate in that moment, and I wasn't. And it's tricky. It's sometimes situation by situation.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a solution to almost everything except from ego. And like almost everything almost every like problems I personally like pay attention to in my day-to-day life, they stem from ego. Almost all of them. And it's like when you can't solve something is because someone's ego is getting hurt and they're defending it too hard and they're not dropping that defensiveness or that whatever mask they have in their mind for themselves. And it's just a lot of times like a pause during a fight or an argument is probably like the best solution for my own personal experiences. Is that like when you're in the middle of a fight and you're arguing, a lot of times, like no matter how logical you are, no matter how much you're really trying to make it work, you're already stuck in that ego position of like defending yourself, and nothing that the other person could really say is gonna help. And the best thing is to like, let's go on a pause and let's just like take a break and calm down, actually like calm your nerves down, like take some deep breaths in, and then maybe form an apology, because no one's really apologizing in the middle of a fight. I don't know, I've never had that.
No, I agree with you 100%. Sometimes taking a break can be the most helpful thing in the world, especially when you're really overwhelmed and you're angry and you just feel your blood boiling. Don't try to keep going. Don't try to keep solving it. It's not avoidance. If you just take a minute to breathe and calm down, come back to in like 20 minutes, come back in an hour, like just say, I need to go on a walk, and just calm down, because you're not going to do anything productive when you're overwhelmed or pissed. Like,
it's very
true. You gotta be calm. There's
this idea that I actually hear from a lot of people, and it's that we don't go to bed mad. We don't go to bed mad at each other. And I'm like, why? Maybe sometimes you need a night. Maybe sometimes you need to sleep on it. Like, why are you forcing yourself to fix a problem in this amount of time? You know, like maybe one day is not enough. Maybe we do need to go to bed mad and like wake up the next day. It's a new day. You wake up, you feel better. But I hear so many of my friends say this, like,
it's an old Bible verse that says, don't let the sun set on your anger. And it's this idea of don't hold on to resentment. That's the lesson behind it. It's like, don't like just be holding on to resentment forever. But people take that literally.
Yeah.
They mean like, oh crap, the sun sets in 20 minutes.
We have to figure it out right now.
Yeah. Most people fight at night too, which is ironic. Like, the sun already set, guys. You're already pissed. Just go to bed.
Go to bed.
It's tricky. I think that the goal is to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's what we were just talking about. Even in a complicated thing like trying to say sorry over a comment of fatness, it's like, God, how do I be honest and still build the other person up, and maybe even be open for growth and change in my own heart? Like, and that's the idea, is like, don't just try to smooth stuff over for the sake of smoothing it over, because that builds up. Like, you don't think it does. It's like it's easy to moralize and feel good about it. Like, oh, I'll just be more understanding. I'll just be more patient. I'm not going to make a big deal out of nothing. When in reality, all those things kind of build up, and over time, you're mad at that person and you can't even tell why. And it's because all these arguments got shortcut, and you never actually dealt with anything.
Right.
Because you were so focused on not being angry that you stopped being honest.
Right.
And you gotta be honest. Yeah.
So, also you have this example, you had this, well, I'll let you get to the example, but one of my favorite videos of you on your TikTok was that how to get over feelings of betrayal.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I remember. Yeah. I did a video on like cheating or betrayal. Like, how do you feel?
A lot of people go through that.
Yeah. I think in the video I was saying that, I used an analogy of soup. Is that the one that you're thinking of? Yeah.
It just made so much sense to me. I loved it.
Yeah, I kind of use a silly analogy, like someone pours a bunch of hot sauce in your soup, and it's like, how do I get the hot sauce out of my soup? Because it feels like it's just everywhere. And what I said was you need to like take a bite of the hot sauce soup and then you'll take a bite of fresh soup and put it in. And it's like the only way, sometimes you can't subtract things. Sometimes you can only get rid of things by addition. And you got to add more fresh soup. And the more fresh soup that you add and the more you consume of the kind of like hot sauce soup, eventually you'll get to this spot of just replenishing that bowl of soup and it'll be back to a place that's good. And it's just kind of a goofy analogy that just shows like sometimes the only way, out of betrayal is through. And you got to face it head on. And you got to feel all those feelings of betrayal. And that trust is going to be built up spoonful by spoonful. And that is what nobody wants to hear, because what most people want to hear is like, okay, what can I do just to get over this and stop feeling so miserable? What can I do just to trust him again? I feel like I'm never going to be able to trust him or her again. Like, how do I, because it just feels so overwhelmingly pervasive. And the truth that's so hard to accept is day by day, step by step, there's going to be moments where you're going to have opportunities to build trust. Doesn't mean you always take those opportunities. Doesn't mean your partner always takes those opportunities. But over time, there's a space where you'll start to build back an element of predictability, because that's really what was disrupted. Because let's say like there was an affair and the affair went on for years, and it's like, okay, it's not just—
That's a lot of hot sauce in my soup.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just that moment is different. Yeah, it's not just that there's hot sauce in that soup. There's hot sauce in the soup that I've been drinking for the past 4 years or 5 years or something. Like, and let's say though that, right, and let's say that person really wants to repair the relationship though, because that's more common than you think. Because I mean, the quick answer is like, well, yeah, leave them. Like if they had an affair for that long, like forget that, move on. But maybe you had kids with this person. Maybe this person's been your best friend your whole life, and you want to repair and they want to repair, which is a situation a lot of people find themselves in, whether, I don't know, you think they should or not. It's real. And so how do you move towards repair? Well, that's 4 years of soup that's tainted with hot sauce. That's a lot of soup that it's going to take to build back up.
And how much is the total soup?
Huh?
How much is the total soup? How long have they been together in total?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, we could just make something up, like 20 years, let's say.
Oh, okay.
20, 30 years. I don't know, or maybe less. I think
it's like, imagine you've been with someone for 5 years and they've been cheating on you for 4 years.
Yeah, that's—
I don't know about that, man. I don't know how much he wants to do, like,
repair
it. I think that might be beyond. But like, let's say you've been with someone for like, I don't know, 20 years. I don't know. I'm not trying to put my personal opinion into this. So
I mean, it depends on the circumstance, right? It depends on all pieces. But I'm not saying in that anyone should or shouldn't get together. I'm saying for those who want to stay together, the way through is by building trust slowly but surely. Because if that's 4 years of betrayal, it might take a lot longer to build that trust back up. That's a really tricky one, the whole like cheating, because like it could go in so many different ways, and a lot of those might be more forgivable than the other ones. And it's so like there's not like a blueprint for it. It's not like, well, if they do this and this, you leave them. If they do this and this, you can take them back and like work through it. It's like where did I watching porn is meant as cheating to a lot of people. And there are a lot of people who take back someone who, like, as you said, like actually did like cheat on them for years. So it's like just got to figure out between the two of you. That's it. That's what I think too. I think you got to figure out between the two of you. I did a video recently on that topic as well, where it was is looking at porn cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reality is that's up to the couple.
Yeah.
That's up to those people. And I almost try to sidestep that question, because I think when we're asking that question, what we're trying to find out is like, okay, do I have the permission to leave? Is that a valid option, or am I overreacting? Is that should I not be as hurt by this? Or
they like ask you to tell them how to feel.
Yeah. And that's not just about porn. That's about any kind of betrayal. Maybe it was just a cyber affair. Maybe it was just an emotional affair. Maybe they slept together, but just once. Maybe they slept together a whole bunch, but it wasn't anything emotional. It was just sex. I don't know. Like every affair has weird like
Yeah,
nuances to it
yeah.
where you're trying to place like, how should I react to this?
Right.
And the unfortunate answer is only you know that. Only you both know that.
Add
And
hot sauce to his soup.
well, you mean cheat right back? Well, probably not. I probably don't do that.
I'm kidding.
More hot sauce probably won't fix this thing. It's difficult, but I think the question that we ask is not, okay, who's like we're just talking about the apology. It's not just about figuring out where to put the blame, because
Yeah,
sometimes that's obvious where to put the blame, but that still doesn't fix it.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
understanding, how did this affect you?
yeah.
Because
And
the
it's not
partner who
fair
cheated needs to
sometimes.
understand that,
Sometimes.
needs to understand, how did my actions make you
Yeah.
feel?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you were saying something, I cut you off.
No, no, I'm sorry. I cut you off.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the process is, okay, I made this decision, however big or small that each of us feel that of a deal this is, whether it's pornography, whether it's sleeping with
Yeah,
somebody, whether it's cyber, whatever, like, how did my actions make you feel? Tell me about
yeah,
the intricacies of that. What fears does that bring up in you? Um, all of that, all those conversations need to be taken to heart, because if you're going to build back trust, that means you're building back familiarity. You're building back an infrastructure where the person can predict your behavior. You're building
yeah,
back a place where that person can depend on you to stick to the mutually negotiated values of your relationship. Because there's some relationships where
true.
it's like, I've worked with several polyamorous couples where
Oh,
sleeping with other partners is fine, but there's lots of restrictions. There's lots of rules around when it is okay, when it's not okay,
oh, interesting.
right? And a betrayal can feel just as intense even in a relationship like that, where it's like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
you said not in our home, and then you did that in our
yeah.
home.
Because you
And
get to define what betrayal is. There's not like one set definition for it, you know? You get
yeah,
to
well,
decide what it is, you get to define
yeah,
it.
it's the values of your relationship. It's the expectations that you both mutually agreed. The betrayal is the dishonesty. The betrayal is the where I
Yeah.
was counting and depending on you for something, and then I fell, or I was made to look the fool, or I don't know. Like it can look like a bunch of different things.
So do you
But
think the right way to do it is like when you get with someone, you just like define everything for them that is like do you define to them, hey, like betrayal and cheating is this to me? Like is that
sure.
what you do? Because then
I
like
mean,
what
it
if you change
can. I think
mind
it
down the
depends on
line?
how serious the relationship is, right? I think you progressively do that. So I
Yeah,
mean, you're just going on a few dates. Like maybe you are not. Maybe you're not exclusive. Like maybe that's not the
yeah.
time to have conversations like that. But then, especially once you get exclusive, like what does the exclusive mean? That's a good conversation. Hey, I want you to be my girlfriend or boyfriend. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Sure, and talk about your values. Like I think people are worried to talk about values because they don't want to scare people off. But
Yeah.
man, talk like, okay, do you think having sex with other people is okay? Like maybe not. Do you think that pornography is okay? And here's the reality is that a lot of people maybe have like a lot of these boundaries and expectations at the beginning of the relationship, but then over time things change. And so you got to keep rehashing these conversations and checking back in and being
Yes.
like, okay, this is where we started.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe originally I thought porn was fine, but after kind of dating for a few years and seeing how this is affecting our relationship in your life, like I actually changed my mind. I don't think that this is actually something very helpful for us.
Yeah.
You keep comparing me to things and asking me to do things I'm uncomfortable with. Like the way you're going about and using that in our relationship is not a net positive. That's okay. Like you can have that conversation and then you negotiate that and you have a conversation about the impact of that's having on you. Or, hey, I thought that opening our relationship would be exciting. After a while of trying it, I think that it hasn't been very great. Like I want to go back to closing it back up again. Or
Yeah.
the other way around, like
Yeah.
we've been exclusive for a long time. I think I want to open the relationship. Like the goal is to have
Yeah.
negotiated, open and honest conversations
Mm-hmm.
before you make all these decisions that impact the relationship. Because I don't know, it's a very different conversation to be like, hey, I want to open up the sexual relationship, then hey, I already did. You're cool with that, right? Like
Mm.
those are
That's
totally different conversations. Yeah.
100%. And I think people get scared off so easily that a lot of times, like, people don't really want to just cause any commotion. And so they would rather just like do something and like keep it a secret rather than like bring it up. Or even if they're uncomfortable with something, they would rather just like suck it up than like actually bring it up because they don't want it to like turn into this fight. And like, now that person's going to be in a bad mood for like a week, you know? So they would rather just like
100%.
keep things to themselves than like bringing things up because It's not easy.
Well, and no wonder, because my guess is that if you've been with someone for a long time, you can kind of predict where they're going to land. Like maybe you know their values.
Yeah,
And so you
exactly.
want to change some sort of status of your relationship, but you know they're not going to be okay with it, or at least you have a
Yeah.
good hunch. So then you're secretive, and you think I can have my cake and I can eat it too. And I don't know. When you bend reality like that, it snaps back. It comes back to get you.
That's very true.
You see it over and over. Or you think that your partner's asking to change something in your relationship, and you don't want to lose them. You're afraid if you really are honest about how you feel about that prospect that they'll leave. And so you say yes, but you don't mean yes. You just don't want them to go. And so then,
Yeah.
but then you feel resentful and angry that they're doing these things, but you agreed. And so it's your own fault. Like it gets so complicated. Like
Yeah.
honesty, I think, I mean, we both know this listening to Jordan Peterson, like honesty is at the center of so much of it.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. Yes, being honest might create catastrophes, but those catastrophes are rarely as bad as the catastrophe of being dishonest. Sometimes that builds a world that's way worse.
Yeah, but sometimes people want to do delayed honesty. They're like,
Mm,
yeah, I'll tell them, but just not right now,
yeah, yeah, you're right.
you know?
Yeah.
All right, well, I've kept you for an hour and a half, which I'm so grateful. I know how busy you
Yeah.
are.
Oh,
I really
absolutely.
appreciate this. I had such an amazing time. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. It was great talking with you. Yeah, we've read a lot of the same books. This was a super
Yeah,
engaging conversation.
love it.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram, just at Matthias J Barker. That's my user. And then also on my website, I do a bunch of workshops on different topics. And
Yes.
if you want something deeper, I have a podcast and a YouTube channel. I'm kind of just everywhere, but
Yeah.
yeah, doing a lot of stuff. So Matthias J Barker, that's kind of where you can find it. Mathias. That's
Yeah,
how you
and
spell
for how amazingly like deep and helpful your like your workshops and your stuff is, it's like I think they're really fairly priced.
it. Oh, thanks.
They're
Yeah, yeah. I
great.
try to. I want to make it
Yeah.
accessible for people. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want people to
Yeah.
be able. There's a lot of places in the world where, they don't have like free healthcare to be able to access therapists,
Mhm.
on an easy way. And so I think what I've realized, kind of starting to do these workshops, was that yeah, people are really depending on these kinds of things to be able to get a compass
Yeah.
of where to go. So I take them really seriously. Really try to
Absolutely.
do my best.
Absolutely. Well, thank
Yeah,
you so much.
absolutely, absolutely. It was great talking with you. Thank you so much.
You as well. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.